一文なしだ。
そんな時はアマゾンライダーに変身だ。
え？
Just passing through. Kamen Rider Decade. Hello and welcome to Earth Alien ProtoMet. In 2009, to celebrate the 10th consecutive season of Kamen Rider since the series returned in 2000, Toei produced the short-lived anniversary season, Kamen Rider Decade. Tsukasa Kadoya, an amnesiac with a curious ability to take bizarre photographs, finds that with the fate of the multiverse in the balance, he must become Kamen Rider Decade and travel to the AR worlds, alternate realities based on the past 9 seasons of Kamen Rider, from Kuga to Kiva. The question is, though, is he traveling to save the multiverse, or to destroy it? Despite being only 31 episodes, this show is a bit complicated, as are my thoughts about it. I don't normally do this, but today's video is going to be full of spoilers because it's hard to talk about Decade without getting spoilery. So jump to the end of the video if you want to hear my thoughts while avoiding said spoilers. Time is down here, as it always is, if you're curious. Because he's amnesiac, we learn about Tsukasa as the series progresses and the character's search for his missing past. Is what I'd say if the show actually did that. Instead, from start to finish, Tsukasa remains essentially the same character, kind of a jerk, but not quite an asshole. And while he does help the riders he encounters across the various AR worlds, it's mostly because he's making it up as he goes along, just as uncertain of the future as anyone. In fact, the most development we get for him as a character comes from a movie that might not even be canon to the show. This brings us to his abilities as Kamen Rider Decade. He has the ability to transform into the various Kamen Riders that were the main characters of their respective shows, and even has access to some of their abilities. But while these form changes are used often enough, I don't feel like they're used effectively enough. Granted, by the end of the first episode, he loses these powers and has to gradually regain the abilities from the AR worlds he visits, so I can kinda understand why he doesn't just use these forms all throughout the show, but I still kinda wish he did. And after regaining the powers of the 9 previous riders, he then randomly gains access to his complete form, which allows him to summon the other riders to battle alongside him in their respective ultimate forms, which he uses pretty effectively. Which, of course, brings us to the AR worlds that the characters travel to. While each world is meant to represent the 9 previous seasons, with the exception of Denno's world, they are only based on the shows they pay tribute to. None of the characters from the show, or at least not the original versions of those characters, appear, but rather each world visited is its own self-contained story that merely uses the concept of each season as a setting. As a result, while each 2-episode story does develop the riders that appear in them, once the story is done, so too is their development, meaning that Tsukasa and the others are, as Tsukasa is so apt to put it, merely passing through the stories of these characters. The one exception is Yusuke Onodera, the version of Kamen Rider Kuga that exists in his AR world, who chooses to travel with Tsukasa's group to see the other worlds. He's a pale imitation of Yusuke Godai, acting more as a newbie still learning the ropes, compared to Tsukasa coming across as a veteran, despite being even newer to being Decade than Yusuke is to being Kuga. Also, the writers seem to forget that Yusuke even is a Kamen Rider, as he barely transforms during the show's initial story arc, and even sparingly afterwards. If anything, his trainee-esque character serves to remind the audience that the AR worlds aren't the shows that they represent. Except Denno's world, that one's spot on. And rounding out the trio of main characters, we have Natsumi Hikari, the token civilian. While her main motivation is saving her homeworld, she proves to be the one character most concerned with the mystery of just what Tsukasa has to do with all the weirdness occurring in the multiverse, as well as everyone's apparent urge to eliminate Tsukasa for merely existing. That having been said, she's also the only one having prophetic dreams that appear to depict Decade as a destructive force, so it's unclear if he truly is a hero or not. Also, her grandfather, Eijiro Hikari, who owns the photo studio that can travel between dimensions, acts as the comic relief for the series. Except when he's not. And that brings us to Narutaki, an enigmatic man who serves as the primary villain for the first half of the series, summoning riders from across the multiverse, most of which are villains in their home dimensions, to try to eliminate Kamen Rider Decade, who he views as the destroyer of worlds. But if he's right, that actually makes him a hero, right? It's never quite clear whether Narutaki is a force for good or evil. Heck, some pieces of media even depict him as working for Daishocker, more on them later, seeming to imply that he's on the same side as Tsukasa, or at least the version of Tsukasa from that aforementioned movie of questionable canonicity. After the show exhausts the 9 seasons that preceded Decade, the group continue their journey with no clear goal in mind. The worlds they now find themselves in are more creatively themed. The first, the world that Tsukasa gains access to his complete form from, represents all the evil rider counterparts from Dark Kiva to Dark Kabuto to Ryuga. Then there are worlds based on Kamen Riders Amazon, Black RX, and Black, the latter two even bringing back the lead actor from both shows. There's even the first official crossover with Super Sentai, with the gang finding themselves in the world of Samurai Sentai Shinkenger, though most of the action occurs in Decade, leaving their appearance in Shinkenger proper kind of abrupt and confusing. But before they start traveling to these worlds, the group is joined, in a sense, by the anti-hero Kamen Rider D-End, Kaito Daiki, a dimension-hopping thief seeking to steal the treasures of each AR world for his own ends. Whereas Decade could transform into other riders, D-End has the ability to summon riders, giving him a numbers advantage at times. And unlike Tsukasa, Daiki actually gets some development in the form of the world of D-End, where his backstory is explored, though no explanation is given as to why he became a thief of the multiverse. And during the second half of the show, a new villainous organization rears its head, Daishocker. Consisting of villains from throughout the history of Kamen Rider, though mostly Apollo Geist, this organization plots to conquer all of the AR worlds, bringing them all under their tyrannical rule. And it's revealed in the aforementioned movie of questionable canonicity, now finally revealed as Kamen Rider Decade All Riders vs. Daishocker. The leader of Daishocker is in fact Tsukasa, who somehow lost his memories while traveling the multiverse. But again, it's uncertain if that movie story is even true, because while it was originally intended to be the end of the series, the writers for the show changed their mind and had the show end with the reveal that instead of saving the multiverse by befriending and helping the AR riders, Tsukasa has in fact been accelerating and aiding the destruction of the multiverse, as he was told right from the start to destroy the other riders, and chose to ignore that instruction. This leads to the entire multiverse turning against him in a battle that ends the series on a cliffhanger that wouldn't be resolved until months later with the release of the first Movie War film, Kamen Rider X Kamen Rider Double End Decade, Movie War 2010. The show is a chaotic mess. The concept of a hero traveling to different worlds representing past shows is interesting on paper, but in execution, by changing the worlds to only being based on past seasons rather than a part of those seasons, it means that the brief storylines can only be self-contained, and Decade doesn't learn from the past, rather inserting himself unintentionally into the lives of others before buggering off to who knows where. And while this doesn't quite work for the show as it is, it does mean that Tsukasa is a character that can, and has, made a return at numerous times following the series, to just show up and then disappear with no end goal in mind, such as repeatedly in Kamen Rider Zeo, which manages to make him quite a memorable character despite the lack of development in his own show.
For as awkward as the show is, it's hard to deny that Kamen Rider Decade is a fascinating character who should have had a better show. And the lead actor, Masahiro Inoue, has not only reprised his role from this, as previously mentioned, but has also appeared in both the Garo franchise as a major villain, Jinga, as well as starred in his own indie-produced series, Sentika F8AB A6 G-Series. I'd recommend giving Kamen Rider Decade a watch, if mostly out of curiosity. And until next time, I'm ProtoMet. See ya!